Welcome to today's cross-border conversation. Thank you to Genelec for supporting this series of talks. So our speakers today are drawn from the ScreenCraft Works community, and they're going to be discussing the process and creativity of dialogue editing.
My name is Sara. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with glasses, brown hair, and a white blouse. I am a dialogue editor, a podcast editor, a sound designer, and sometimes a re-recording mixer for films and podcasts.
My name is Claire Lawton. I go by she, her. I'm a white woman with blonde-ish hair up in a bun and a brown sweater. I'm a post supervisor. I work on TV and film. I'm between Los Angeles and New York, kind of depending on project, but I'm currently in Phoenix, Arizona.
My name is Milton. My pronouns are he, him. I am a black man with short curly hair in a white shirt. And I am a sound mixer, dialogue editor, sound editor, working in film and TV in Kingston, Jamaica.
My name's Teresa. I am a white woman with long blonde hair in a black shirt, and I am a sound editor and a dubbing mixer, or I think in American that is a re-recording mixer. I am based in Bristol in United Kingdom. I work across TV, advertising, and film, and whatever really comes my way.
In terms of my background, typically working on sound jobs here in Jamaica, as Teresa kind of alluded to, you kind of work on what you get your hands on. And dialogue editing for me kind of piqued my interest as someone who kind of grew up with a music background and then moving into audio post-production, having studied audio production. And the thing about well-edited dialogue is that it should be so transparent that you don't even realize that it's there. And that's one of the things about our craft that kind of makes it go even more unseen or unheard, which is when dialogue is edited well, you hardly ever notice that you're being manipulated to hear. Well, not you're not being manipulated, but the sound is being produced or manipulated in a way so that you're able to hear and dig into whatever story is being told.
That is something that someone told me the first time I got into audio, and someone said the good audio is the good sound on a movie or a film is when you don't like pay attention to it, when you don't realize. It's when you hear bad audio, that's when you're like, oh yeah, it should be ignored, basically, unless it's like brilliant, and then obviously you should pay attention to it, but like on a normal base, yeah. I come from a family where my mom and my dad are both in the TV industry. And so I kind of went in their footsteps. But originally I studied documentary filmmaking, and that was back in Slovakia, which is where I'm from. Slovakia is a country in Europe for anyone who doesn't know. And the TV and film industry is quite small there. It's basically non-existent. And so I went to England for what we call Erasmus, which is half or a full term abroad that you can do. And I did that, and I fell in love with sound. They were looking for someone to do the sound on the short film. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I did it. And then suddenly I realized that this is what I want to do, and found myself in Bristol, which is a hub for natural history production, which is something that I really wanted to get into. As it is in this industry, there is a massive competition. So I had to start as a runner in a post-production house, and then build my way up basically to be a dubbing mixer.
I was lucky to land in post very early, I think, in my TV film career. my background's in journalism. So I wrote for a paper for a long time before moving to New York and pursuing arts. And I think that I was lucky to land in teams in which I kind of always found myself at the center, like in the center kind of cog, making sure that people had what they needed, which was kind of my function as a journalist too, was asking questions and kind of figuring out, distilling information, figuring out what was important and when things needed to get to whom at what time. So yeah, that's kind of how I landed in it and learned to really love it. A post supervisor gets the opportunity to meet a collection of very talented people and is in a supportive role, which I found that I really value. And I get to work with the best people from all the best uh, departments.
Much like Milton, I got into audio through music. So I went to college originally with the intention of studying music, and then I switched to audio engineering. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, so it was a very musical town, is a very musical town. But at some point early in my college career, there was a project that involved, like a homework project that involved post-production, and that's when I realized that it was a thing at all, and I fell in love with it instantly. And then soon after, I started dialogue editing for podcasts, and that's when I realized that was my thing, is the human voice and just all the details and the intricacies of that. So that's when I realized that's what I wanted to go into and do that for my career.
As someone who for the last 5 years have been working in TV and broadcasting, the turnaround is very, very fast. So there is not much time to prepare for anything. Things are just thrown at you. So how does one prepare?
One of my important things for preparing a dialogue edit, in addition to the technical stuff of getting the tracks organized, is knowing what the director wants out of it. And a dialogue edit is a pretty technical thing. It's usually the mix where you start getting more creative, but it's still important to know what the director wants from the beginning, so you can kind of figure out what scenes are going to probably be pushed forward in the mix, what scenes are going to be buried beneath music most likely, and stuff like that. That makes a big difference when it comes to managing your time, how much time you spend on each scene. If it's going to be buried, maybe you don't need to spend as much time on it. But it's just you get a feel for it. Have a phone call with the director or the post-production supervisor or whoever is in charge, and figure out what the tone of the movie is going to be. And it does impact your dialogue edit.
The thing is, we all learn from our mistakes. And this is how I learned that, I am working on something that's important to me, but it's not my project. I am working for someone. I'm working for a client. And it is important what they want. It was quite important to ask the questions, is this something that do you want it natural, or do you want it, dynamic? What do you want from this? But because I worked mostly for TV, it was very much like the same thing. And the one thing that I learned when I first started was just do not get stuck on one thing forever, because you think, oh, this is really noisy, I can really make it sound clean. But then you spent like half an hour or an hour just trying to do this one, I don't know, 5-second clip. And then you go back to it. And when you put everything over it, the music, the voiceover, the sound effects, the backgrounds, like all of it, it doesn't matter, because it's really just 5 seconds of something that's going to just be buried in everything else, like Sara said. So it's really important to basically, before you even start editing the dialogue, it's really important to have a look at the whole thing.
It's very important for you, once you've received all of the assets, to kind of assess what's possible and how you're going to manage your time. Because of course we have these deadlines to meet, and we can't spend too much time trying to refine just a small section of the project that we're working on. I've done a lot of work for social media, web like social media posts and that kind of thing, corporate. And a lot of the times when you do get dialogue from these videos, if it's something that has not been shot with a film crew and it's just like a one-off videographer, maybe they have a small wireless system, and you're kind of battling, the sound of the lavalier, or maybe you only have the scratch audio from the camera. So a lot of times what you have to do in situations like those is to really just be realistic, about what you can do, and also have the discussion where you're setting the expectations as to what the client will receive out of the dialogue editing process. You're setting both your expectations, but you're also being sure that the client understands what to expect out of the end result, and then just making plans to see how well, in the world of corporate, how quickly can you get there. But I think that applies across different types of media as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I can build off of expectations for sure, just from kind of the supervising aspect in terms of building out a schedule, and also communicating then with the sound department in terms of how much time I may think that they need and how much time they definitely know that they need. I'm in the process of post-production on a documentary for IMAX, which is it includes a lot of outdoor um, the things that are happening outside, a lot of fast moving parts. And I'm in almost daily communication with our sound team, doing test turnovers and flagging things that I think will take more time, and then trying to build a schedule around that. So I think too, the more we can kind of communicate in terms of how long we think things will take, and then how long, how much that fits within the budget or not. But I think the expectation is really important to set it early so that nobody is facing a gigantic task and they have 3 days to clean up audio in which there's I don't know, a hurricane outside or something.
Do you also encourage pre-meets to basically, like you said, just to
Yes.
yeah.
I'm a
see-
big fan of stuff like this, of kind of coming together and hashing out creative ideas, but then also I think spotting sessions are really important. Just even if it's even honestly, if it's a rough cut, looking through the rough cut, not to do a formal spot, but looking through a rough cut and maybe flagging things that would take more time, so that I know when we get closer to lock, to build in maybe a day or two more, so that we get the best quality possible.
I feel like something that could be, looked at even before we get it is the production phase, and how the dialogue is basically recorded. They say we'll fix it in post, and that is actually something that we can do to a certain point, but we are not magicians.
One of the things that primarily comes to mind in terms of these different sources, whether it's production, sound, voiceover material, loop groups, there can be, depending on the type of project that you're working on and the budget, of course, these different categories, if we might call them that, or groups of sound, of dialogue that need to be edited, may have varying quality in terms of how well the dialogue can be captured. So when I think of production sound, there typically there might be more issues on set with the placement of a lavalier, potentially picking up more clothing rustle depending on the costume and how it was positioned, or just in terms of locations being tricky. So those are the things that you tend to think about when you're going to approach a dialogue edit for production sound. For voiceover, in terms of editing voiceover, everything, our jobs are made easy when recordings are done well. When recordings are done very well, then you can focus on maybe just, leveling out the dialogue so that it's consistent and reducing harsh sibilance and that kind of thing. But when you start to introduce other factors like background noise or maybe voiceovers that are done in home setups that may sound a little boxy, uh, and need a little more work, uh, then that will influence your approach. I don't think in editing any of these the process is fundamentally different. Maybe you have a little bit more noise reduction um, in certain scenarios, but at the end of the day, the goal is or should always be, but primarily we're aiming towards clear, intelligible dialogue that's consistent and void of any auditory distractions.
Dialogue is the most important part of film sound. That's like rule number one that we're taught, is that you have dialogue, you have sound effects, you have music, but the dialogue always needs to be heard. And you're not mixing when you're doing the dialogue edit. You're making sure the dialogue is clear and sounds good. And obviously you have to consider your time limitations and everything. Consider what it's going to sound like in the full mix, but in general, it needs to be heard and it needs to sound as good as possible, because most likely that dialogue is going to be front and center almost every time. So you want everything on screen to be heard, and that the mixer can always tone it down or mute something later, but you as the dialogue editor are working with everything you've got, all the dialogue you've got. One thing that makes it easier if you have a lot of different things is kind of checkerboarding your tracks and separating them out. So a lot of times you've got different mic sources, or you have different people speaking at once that are recorded on separately, not recorded on the same microphone. And so you separate them out onto different tracks. Sometimes you label, or like in Pro Tools, you can like color the different tracks so that it's really noticeable. For me, that's what I do to kind of make it visually easier to edit. In the edit, I would say the important thing is treat all dialogue with equal importance, and then the importance will be decided in the mix.
And I would maybe tag a little bit on that, in that I feel like an important part of dialogue is prepping, is prepping for dialogue, is making sure that I feel like I ask my sound department to advise on microphones. If we're sending somebody a microphone to do remote ADR, I'm asking, okay, we're going to be in this really complicated environment where there are a lot of things going on. Maybe we don't have somebody on set to really advise or see the bigger picture, but if you're to imagine this scenario, like, what are the potential disasters? What can we do to prevent a situation in which we are turning over a lot of sound that then you have to really handle with a lot of care? How can we make your job easier? And so I feel like that is part of kind of how the post rolls, at least how I try to break it out between those.
When Sara was talking about how dialogue is so important, that is audible, and that was also how we did things, was that the dialogue was priority. When you started the track lay, when you started the process, the first thing that you did was the dialogue. Because we had so little time, it was something that was to be prioritized. The voiceover was usually recorded in our studio or some other studio, so that was pretty good, and that was something that we left completely till the end, because that only needed a little bit of I don't know, de-esser or a little bit of compressor or something like that. And the dialogue was the main part. Then you did the rest of it, and then music and voiceover was the last thing.
I wanted to touch on something that Claire had mentioned earlier in terms of preparation being essential to the dialogue edit, because especially when you're working on something like a short film, I find the better prepared you are as a dialogue editor, the easier your edit will be. And if it's a case where you're working on a production where the crew may be a little bit more inexperienced, I've had instances for example, where I've gotten tracks to edit for short films where there's little to no metadata in the actual recordings of the of the files. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with metadata, metadata is information encoded in the audio file that can clue in the post-production department as to what scene, what take, potentially any notes from the production sound mixer about what might have went wrong, maybe what tracks you can use, etc. This all of this is information that can be embedded in the recordings, and that can help us once we're assessing all of the assets that we've received, to ensure that everything is there. Many times you can even see the preferred take from the get-go, so you're not having to sit through and listen to everything. But it's essential to ensure that this information is passed along to the post-production department, because it makes our life so much easier. And we can also just check to see that, say for example, we're in the middle of an edit and there's a particular word that was said that might have had a little clothing rustle on the lav mic. We're able to then quickly search through other takes as well, to find maybe a word or a syllable to replace that sound that may not be intelligible. And then that's also part of the creativity of dialogue editing, where if you're splicing together different takes, you're not only worried about the sonic quality, but you're also thinking actively about sync, ensuring that anything that you're bringing into that file matches the performance and is also not visually distracting. Even though we're focused on, of course, the superb sound quality, we also have to bear these things in mind in terms of, will my edit alter the performance of the actor? Will it change the meaning of what they were trying to convey? Or will it go out of sync? Maybe the flow of the line was perfect, but it's just slightly out of sync, so you have to spend more time trying to then time stretch the performance to try to get it to match the waveform of the guide track. All of these little tricks that we try to pull out to ensure that our edits seem as seamless as possible. They're enabled by ensuring that, one, we have all of the assets and all of the information that we need to be able to go through everything that we have on hand.
Yeah, is it helpful, Milton? Can I ask in terms of that kind of preparation? I've been in situations in which we will either pass along transcripts of recorded audio so that you can find replacements for certain words or certain phrases from people, or even having one of like an assistant editor communicate back and forth to kind of pinpoint potential replacements.
So in terms of transcripts, here unfortunately I'm not I don't have access to a larger post team, so typically when I work on projects like these, I do end up working on them alone. But I find transcripts useful when they also have timestamps embedded in them. So I have a particular software that I use that scans the audio file, uses AI to detect the speech, and it also gives little timestamps as to where each word was said. And I think Avid is also implementing a feature like that into Pro Tools soon, from what I could see at the recent conventions, where it will scan the audio file and appear on the editing timeline as well. So those sorts of things are definitely time savers when you're trying to search through for something quickly. Having the transcript per audio file, yes, is useful, but it's not as useful as also having the timestamps, because I may know that this particular audio file contains the phrase that I'm looking for, but I still have to figure out where to find it. So I'll have to sit through and fast forward, rewind, try to find the exact section and then sync it back. So it's still a bit of a process, but it certainly is uh, more useful than not having a transcript at all. But I find that if we can try to incorporate the new technology in how we work, it can help us to be more efficient, in this kind of process.
I was just going to add on to this that one of the I think most important things is to get all the tracks from the editor. So many times what happens is that we receive an AAF where I have 20 tracks, but only the first 4 have any audio on it, because the editor thought, okay, this was recorded on 8 tracks, mix left, mix right, and then another 6 tracks that were supposed to be the ISO, so a lava mic or a boom or whatever. And they think, oh, these first 2 sound really great, I'll get rid of the rest. And they never put them back. It's important to have the metadata that you can do a mic pool or a conform, which is something that you can do in Pro Tools or whatever software you're using. Pro Tools is very good at this.
Already touching on the question of like, what can the production sound people do to help us? The visuals are right in front of your face. The sound doesn't get thought about often until the sound people in post-production are trying to fix problems that were missed. So having a sound mixer can be really great for getting good sound during the filming process. If you're a sound mixer, speak up to the director during the filming process. And if a location has noises going on, if there's airplanes flying overhead, if there's an AC on or a computer in the room making noise, pinpoint those problems before filming if you can. And that helps post-production immensely, because it's taking those problems away without post-production having to worry about the problems. So you're getting great sound in the first place, and then post-production, the dialogue edit can make it better rather than having to like fix problems. Another like thing that I would love to add, if you're a sound mixer, is by sound mixer, I mean the person recording the sound on set during filming. Record 30 to 60 seconds of room tone in every single set or location that it is being filmed on, and give that to the dialogue editor or to the sound editor and the mixer during post-production, because we use that. You're just recording the sound of the room, just blank room tone, no one doing anything or speaking. And that is so helpful for dialogue editing, because that little blank sound in between words gets used to smooth out the dialogue edit. And I rarely get it from a AAF, from a delivery, but it's so helpful when it is taken into consideration.
If you know that sound is basically screwed and we don't, we need more time, what do you do about the budget? Like, Claire, maybe this is a question for you. Like, what do you do about these situations?
I find that flagging things early helps, so that you know kind of how long things take. I think that the more that I can do early to schedule and build a schedule that everybody is comfortable with, given the parameters of the project, it creates a much happier environment once we get to finishing and once we get to turnovers and like building the expectations and kind of doing all the spotting and like everybody has talked about, kind of flagging the potential problems early is the best thing that you can do for a tight schedule or budget. I think walking in whenever there is one of those constraints, that's when I know I have to start working. Like we have to start tomorrow if the budget doesn't allow for the schedule that we need in the mix or in color. I think that and I never want to send too much, but I do love sending tests to to our sound department to just say, I know we're not turning this over for a couple weeks or a couple months, but I want to give you a heads up about this scene, where there was, a cat in the alley, and we're a little concerned because there's an issue that we didn't foresee. And I think that if we can kind of game plan a solution, whether it be addressing something now in the edit, or if it's kind of a non-starter, then maybe addressing something that we can do while still editing, that also helps the schedule and the budget. So yeah, I think I would hopefully know that the schedule and budget is tight walking in, and then start preparing kind of immediately. And I think that yeah, communication, just communicating as much as possible.
Seeing that we were addressing questions in the chat, there was one asking if it's the job of the dialogue editor to match the tone of ADR with production dialogue, or if that's the job of the re-recording mixer or the dubbing mixer. Also, is it the job of the editor to flag clips for ADR or the director? Typically, if we're looking at matching the tone of ADR with production dialogue, that typically comes under the responsibility of the dubbing mixer. If it's a case where we're looking at the question of, say for example, synchronization, and this will definitely depend on the team and on the workflow of that particular production. But if there's a case where there is ADR that has to be synchronized to the original performance, that may be something that dialogue editors have to do, or maybe something that certain dubbing mixers prefer doing themselves.
I worked on a show called Animals Up Close, which is on Disney Plus. It's a natural history show, and it has a host who goes into different parts of the world, and he watches different animals. And they already knew when they were shooting that they will need ADR. And that was because they were in such harsh conditions, sometimes on a boat where it was really windy, or it was snowing, or they were, like in the Arctic, or just surrounded by the noise of the ship, that they flag this at the production stage that this will need ADR. So I think there is, like you said, it really depends on the situation. Because if you're working on a short film, and then, they don't have the budget to do ADR, but they really needed to, they shot somewhere really loud, then obviously we are going to be the ones that need to flag that at a post-production stage. But I feel like in a lot of like high-end TV productions or film production, this is usually flagged at the stage of production. But I might be wrong. I'm just thinking that might be, it's just a case of like what you're working on.
Also, in my experience, the director flags the clips for ADR unless they miss something. And then as a dialogue editor, it's like, well, this isn't going to work. And you then communicate with the post-production supervisor, the director, whoever you're communicating with, to ask for ADR. That is my experience. And then, yes, I also think the matching the tone of the ADR, anything to do with like EQ, volume mixing, denoising, adding noise, the re-recording / dubbing mixer would usually tackle that. And the dialogue editor is more get it smooth, get it clean, and then hand it off to the mixer to make it sound good.
Regarding dialogue editing, some advice that I can share is that while it does help to have multiple tools at your disposal to help solve issues, which is part of the job as well, it's very important to have the conversations that we've mentioned that are needed to be had between post-production and production sound, and the director, to ensure that at each stage of the process we're doing the best that we can. So there's an argument that could be had, if you can't afford more time in post-production, Can that money be put towards certain consumables for production sound, like stickies, or something to assist in the dialogue tracks being cleaner, so that when it gets to post production, they don't have to spend as much money. So just be open. And if you're in post production and you're close enough to a production to watch it take place, and you're able to do so, it's very enlightening to see how the tracks that we receive are recorded.
My piece of advice, if you are generally, I think it's for me like the topic of the conversation, manage expectations. If you are a dialogue editor, manage expectations with the production team, the supervisor, the director. Let them know what your abilities are going to be ahead of time. Like as soon as possible, let them know what the possible hangups are going to be, what you can do, what you can't do. Because as Teresa said, dialogue editing is not magic. I would add it's more science than magic in my experience. So just let them know it's important to establish the expectation of what is possible and what isn't ahead of time. And hopefully you make them you exceed the expectations. And then if you are not a dialogue editor, if you're on the production side, or if you're a director or a filmmaker or something like that, I would say keep the same thing in mind with the expectations. Remember that things can, if you have good, fast, and cheap, you can only choose 2 of the 3. And then going off of that, don't look for someone to be a master of all trades with your post-production. Sound people can do a lot when it comes to editing, sound designing, mixing, and that's amazing. Sound people aren't always experts also at video editing, at post-production video. So a lot of times I see postings looking to combine the 2 into one, like, oh, I need someone who's an expert in sound editing, motion graphics, animation, and composition. It takes years to master those. So something to keep in mind. I know budgets are tight, and it is, when someone is an expert at all those things, that is amazing. But it's not often. So keep that in mind, that no one's going to be a master of all trades. But you will find people that are really good at sound, and stick with them and work with them.
I like that. I think my advice would be to ask questions and to not be afraid to ask questions. I think I spent a lot of time kind of in my early career assuming that I needed to know, because I am in between departments, needed to know the language of each department fluently. And I think that walking into a project, I think leaning on people who are really good at their jobs and can flag things as a problem, or say, if I think it might be a problem and I can ask a question to somebody who knows what they're doing, and you have a tool that actually makes that really easy on your end. I know there are a lot of things that are coming out that can help with a lot of the issues that used to be much bigger problems. Yeah, asking questions and just being open to talking early, and continuing to communicate throughout the project with the sound department, I think will help solve a lot of things that you could then run into in post-production.
I was just gonna say, trust your ears. I know that's a cliche, but if you think something sounds better than something else, then it probably does, because you're the expert. And yeah, like Claire said, don't be afraid to ask questions. I've been mentoring Sara, and she basically said that she was bold enough to contact the sound editors from the show The Bear, and she messaged them on LinkedIn, and they were so happy to talk about what they've done. And all I'm going to say
Everyone
is
in
that
post-production is
yeah, like we are all so happy to talk about what we're doing and to be helpful. So don't be afraid to ask questions, because we will definitely be happy to answer them.